Really pleased to be here to talk about the Center Street Cemetery because it is such a gem to have something like this in Wallingford. The pictures you see up there right now, the top picture, if I do sit down, you won't be in, I won't block you. The top picture is what you normally see representing the Center Street Cemetery as it comes in from Center Street and gives that nice curve down to Route 5. The bottom two pictures are the two entrances to the cemetery, the first one being the close-up of the Center Street entrance, and the other one is South Orchard Street entrance. Now, Wallingford was founded in 1670, and the Center Street Cemetery has been and still is the only free public burying ground in the town of Wallingford. And this means that anyone who is a resident of the town of Wallingford can request to be buried in the Center Cemetery, and they do not have to buy a plot as they would in any other cemetery. Okay, the plot is free. You just have to pay for the cost, obviously, of the interment, opening the ground, the whole thing like that, but you do not have to purchase a plot. That's something that is for anyone who lives in the town of Wallingford. Now, it's located on the area called the Plains, which is the low part of Wallingford. You've got the Quinnipiac River to one side, and then it comes all the way up the hill to what now is North Main Street. But back at the time that the town was being founded, it was called Long Highway. And if you look at that map, this is a plot plan of the original plan of Wallingford set out by the surveyor, John Brockett. And it starts down at the bottom of the screen, and that's where you have approximately down to Wharton Brook. And then Route 5, which was then basically just a dirt trail, goes all the way up from New Haven to Hartford. And the Long Highway branches off of that, and it goes all the way through to where now is Dutton Park. And the only streets besides Long Highway that were actually named back then was Cross Highway, which is Ward Street, and let's see if I can actually, okay. Cross Highway is right across here, and that was is Ward Street now. The next one is Center Street, and that's basically a dirt road at that time going down. And then the center, right at the bottom of the hill, this is your burying ground. And that goes from Route 5 or Colony Road along Center Street. It's also on this side, it's along Orchard Street. And additions have been made to the area since the original. So now I believe there's about 10 acres there. Started off smaller than that. Now this is a map of Wallingford in 1868. And if you notice, Whittlesey Avenue isn't even there yet. However, you've got North Main Street across the top, and this is your corner of Center and North. As you go down Center Street, on the left is where the cemetery is located. And on this side, you have all the orchards and meadows that belonged to the property up top here. What have we got up there? That was eventually where streets were brought in here, and Orchard Street being the first, and then Meadow Street. So these came from what the land was used for. That was all part of the Moses Y. Beach property, and his mansion was up at the top of the hill here. The Center Street at that time was a very narrow area going down. And as I say, it was just a dirt road originally. And here they indicate is the Catholic parsonage. So I would expect that that is where Whittlesey Avenue then went in, because you have Holy Trinity School and there was the Holy Trinity Convent right at that area. So this is where that would end up going. Now the first recorded burial is that of Samuel Peck in 1673. He was just an infant, and there's no stone been found to mark that site. The oldest known stone was an irregular slab, and you can see a picture of it. It's basically just a kind of rock that they found somewhere along the way. And it is in honor of William Holt, born in England in 1610, died in 1683, and 73 years old at that time. Markings on the stone simply say 1683 WH 73, indicating the year of death, his initials, and his age. Now, at a later time, during the Wallingford 300 Jubilee in 1970, the the Holt Association of America placed a plaque there to identify the stone and make it a little bit more visible to the public. Okay, there are certain customs in those days to do with cemeteries, and one of them had to do with a large bell similar to the one you see here, and the bell was at the top of Center Street up by the church, which at that time was not a big church like it is now. But on the church property they had a bell, and the bell would toll at sunrise if a death occurred at night. A bell would toll at sunset if a death occurred during the day. 3 strokes for male, 2 strokes for female, and 1 stroke for an infant. And the only time they varied from that was during the time of the King Philip's War, from 1675 to 1678. And this was at the time when the Native Americans were trying their last effort to avoid recognizing English authority and hoping to stop English settlement on their lands. So during that time, no bells were rung, and all the burials were made at night. This was so that the Indians would not be aware that someone in the community had passed away. They tried, whether they knew it or not, they were attempting not to let them know it. Now, starting in May of 1676, the town appointed William Abnatha to dig the graves. He was paid 5 shillings, or $1.25, for every adult grave, and 2 shillings, or 50 cents, for lesser persons. Now, the upkeep of the cemetery was a major amount of work, and initially it was the responsibility of the Ecclesiastical Society of the First Church. And in 1740, a 5-rail fence began to be built around the area to provide privacy. And during this time, Elisha Whittlesey assumed responsibility for maintaining the cemetery in return for food and grazing area for his cow and his sheep. Then in 1795, care of the cemetery was taken over by the town selectmen. In 1848, more land was bought from Benjamin Foote for $200. And in 1871, a tall hedge was built around the cemetery, and gates were installed to control access to the cemetery. Selectmen were appointed to adjust the boundaries and carry out plans for improvement. And this is a picture of what it looked like a little bit later than that. This is in the early 1900s, and as you can see, there's a rail fence around the cemetery and very high hedges there. However, the hedges had now been destroyed by gypsy moths. So they're not just a current insect, but they were back then, and they destroyed the hedges, which would now need to be improved. And the grounds were uncared for and unsightly, as were many of the individual plots, which were in the cemetery, but they had their own little walls around them, or they were raised up on a mound or had hedges. And the thing that really disturbed the merchants was those who moved to Center Street did not want people, their customers, constantly reminded of death as they came down and saw this cemetery right to the side of it. In 1910, this was when a committee of 12 men was appointed to investigate the matter of improving the cemetery and widening Center Street. One of the things that had been happening is when some of the new businesses came down along Center Street and were digging for their basements, they would come across occasionally a body or a coffin that shouldn't have been there because it was beyond the scope of the cemetery property, but nonetheless, that's where it was, and they were not happy about this. So at the first meeting on June 16th, it was determined that 16 feet should be taken from the cemetery along Center Street. Mr. Cook and Mr. Mackenzie marked off the area where the 16-foot line would run. And what I find interesting is so many of the people that you read about back in the day are the same families that are still connected with Wallingford. Mr. Cook has owned large amounts of property in Wallingford. Mr. Mackenzie lived up on North Main Street, and he was right near where the current cemetery, the current library is located. Mr. Phelps was asked to provide a listing of the names on the headstones in the area as best as they could. These headstones were then split up amongst the committee members, and they were to try and contact next of kin about moving the graves. The problem being, some of these graves go back 100 years from that date. What they found, 55 next of kin gave consent for moving the graves. 7 graves had no identifying marks. 21 graves were impossible to locate any descendants due to the families either being extinct in the area or scattered to parts unknown. 2 next of kin refused to give consent to moving their graves, although they were overruled on that. December 2nd, so it was it was from June until December that they did all of the work of trying to locate them all. And then on December 2nd, although not all consents were obtained, they sent the matter to be heard at the next session of the State General Assembly. And on February 8th, 2 months later, approval was given by the General Assembly. And in March 16th of 1911, it was approved by the governor with the stipulation that a notice be published in a daily newspaper having a circulation in the town of Wallingford once a week for 3 consecutive weeks. Also, before moving any monument or headstone, the inscription, or as much as legible, will be transcribed and recorded by the town clerk upon the records of the town. Now this is what the actual notice said, and I have a chart here, which if you want to stop up afterwards, I'll put it on the table up front here. It shows you can read what the announcement was that was run in the newspaper, but also if you're interested, it has a list of the 71 names that were all being moved in the cemetery. So whether they had permission or not, or whether they had gotten hold of relatives, they were all being moved. And there's the 61 of them here, 71 of them here, along with their name, their date of death, and their ages. So I find it very fascinating going through and looking at that. And again, a lot of the names you recognize, but others had probably moved on, gone out west, and you don't see them anymore in town. On May 4th, 1911, a town meeting was held to discuss... Pardon me?
The paper's on...
Oh, sorry about that. I didn't realize I covered it. Okay. May 4th, in 1911, a town meeting was held to discuss formation of the Center Cemetery Association. A resolution was brought to the town to enter into an agreement for the cemetery to be taken over by the Center Cemetery Association. Excuse me. To be responsible for the care and maintenance of the interior of the cemetery, and this was adopted unanimously. On August 8th, a town meeting approved this contract and building of a new wall. And on September 19th, rules and regulations were adopted for the cemetery committee, and it was stipulated that the title to the cemetery would remain with the town. And the association was given power to make rules and regulations as necessary. And back then, those rules included things like prescribing the means in which lots were assigned, setting the charge for the maintenance and upkeep of lots and monuments, setting the charges for opening of graves or moving of graves, placing of flowers and shrubbery, and laying out walks and driveways, etc. Now, the rules have changed or enlarged over the years, And on our website, which is in blue up there, www.centerstreetcemetery.org, you may view all of the current rules and regulations. So by just clicking into that website, that's one of the categories of things. And a little bit further on, I'll show you what other things are on the website. The new wall was designed to be 5 feet high with vertical columns every 20 feet. And you can see where the yellow arrow is pointing. It's kind of hard, since it's all one color, to see where the interim columns are, but that would be one of them there. And then at the entrances, the taller columns were erected with an ornamental design on the top of it. The face of the wall had a rough finish to highlight the blue of the stones in the cement. And the top of the wall had sharp trap rock projecting 1 inch, thus preventing against desecration and improper use, like kids jumping over it. Yeah. And if you look at the picture here, if you open, where's the door? The door's over here. If you open that door and look to your left, that's where I took the picture of that part of the wall. This is along the Prince Street wall, because it was a very clear open area, and the sun was right that day. And that shows you the projections coming out of the stone wall. The columns and the gates were of Egyptian revival style, and the total cost of the wall was estimated to be $7,000. It should be way more than that nowadays, and you can see the corner posts, the gates, and the fencing along the edge. And within the cemetery, within the walls of the cemetery, the ground was leveled, fences and shrubs around individual graves were removed, walkways were laid out. And also they have, and I'm not sure when the actual roadway was put in, the gravel roadway goes around the cemetery, coming in at the Center Street end, circling the cemetery, and coming back out on Orchard Street. In June of 1997, the cemetery was approved for the National Register of Historic Places, and this sign was put at the front of the cemetery. Initially it was on one of these stone pillars entering in. Then in May of 2022, the association received a grant for a plaque to recognize its inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places. And this is approximately a 6-foot-tall pole, and it states that Center Street Cemetery has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1997 by the United States Department of the Interior. And that stands right on the corner. It looks really lovely up here, and the gardening that goes around it here makes it very attractive. And the Center Street Cemetery, this is my last part of this. I really urge everyone to check out our website. We try to keep up information on here that'll be of interest. The About Us talks about the officers. Recent and past news has most all the newspaper articles that have come out about the cemetery, and in the bottom part it goes back into a couple from the 1800s that were in the newspaper. Then we have a category of pictures all throughout the cemetery. And then there's a cemetery index, which has many of the names of the burials. It's not complete by any means, but it has a lot of the names either by date order or by alphabetical. There are 3 articles. One is in memory of John Brockett, one is History of Our Gravestones, and one is Lyman Hall Looking Back. Then there's a walking tour, a page on research and resources, one on the rules of the cemetery, and then the fees and frequently asked questions. So almost anything you want to know, you can find out by going on to here. And some of the most recent events in the cemetery are very interesting, what goes on in there, more than what you expect. And those things are ones that our sexton, Robert Devaney, will now discuss, talking about perhaps some individuals, interesting events, and what is being done to maintain the cemetery site. Thank you very much.
So I would like to echo what Mary Beth Applegate did, and she did a tremendous program here, and I admire her for what she's done. She's our historian at the Center Street Cemetery. She's involved with the Historical Society and so forth. The wall around the cemetery is definitely something that people don't realize is a perfect thing. Most cemeteries have walls around them. Now the identical wall to this, the identical cemetery wall is in Watertown, Connecticut. The same guy that built our wall built one in Watertown. Entrance to the cemetery, as you can see, on across street from the old Ann's Breakfast Place, which is downtown Wallingford, corner of Colony Street and Center. You know, we've been serving families in Wallingford since 1683, and I actually admire that little saying that we have. The gates that are on the cemetery walls were purchased by the Wallace and Whittlesey family and donated to the cemetery. So I've done many Eagle Scout projects in the Center Street Cemetery, and this was one of them by Jim Carlson way back 35, 40 years ago. And this was the original founders or the original prominent people in the cemetery. Now, we talked about the post office, and so when I worked at the Wallingford Post Office, my dad was there for many, many years, and they decided to take down that building, which to this day still irks me because it was a beautiful building. We obtained these pieces of granite so that we could put our National Historic Register name on them. So when people come to the cemetery, and I love to give tours because everything that we do down there is historical and memorable. And you got to remember something: when you walk into the cemetery and you cross the plane, and the plane meaning the gate, you're 341 years in history that has not been changed. Addition of monuments or addition of certain items that we might have put in the cemetery, but you're walking in a property that to this day horseshoes are still coming out of the dirt that we find constantly. Matter of fact, one of our cemetery board members came to me the other day to hand me a horseshoe, which was pretty cool. So I love this picture. And I always tell people that this is the guy that's staring over me, and I always play games with kids about teaching them the Roman numerals, and this was the old Holroyd building in 116 Center Street, staring over and watching the cemetery. This is one of the tours, and this year already, in 2024, we have had 18 tours at the cemetery. So this is a brownstone. Now, you can tell what a cemetery is and how old a cemetery is by looking at its monuments. I was with some friends this past weekend from Arizona, and I said to them, they've been out there for many years, and I said, well, you know, you guys had nothing but wooden crosses that disappeared over time. I said, we had all kinds of monuments and different kind of stone. And he said, yeah, you know, that's true. And we had brought them into the cemetery in Wallingford, and I said, he was very shocked at what he saw. This is a slate. So, here's the story of gravestones. Mary Beth Applegate showed us William Holt's monument. William Holt's monument was a fieldstone. So if you go into an old cemetery and you're trying to figure out how old the place is, and nobody can tell you how old it is, all you had to do is look around. You're in New England, you're here where the New World started. So, and I say this comment and people look at me with open eyes sometimes. You gotta remember something. When people first came here and someone passed away, they were buried in their backyards. That's the bottom line. They decided to start cemeteries like they did in the old world because of disease, because of smallpox and other different medical issues that people had. And they had to get the deceased remains away from the public. They had to get away from the public, they had to get away from the water, they had to get away from everything to keep them alive. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it's the truth. So you look at an old cemetery, you look at a fieldstone marker, then you look at a brownstone that was quarried in Portland. That was the one before that had the little marks on it. Now you're looking at a slate marker. Now, that's a death head on the top there. Slate markers are great to rub. We do gravestone rubbing. But the slate came from the old world. And the reason why it came here was they needed it for ballast of boats. Now, when a boat came over from the old world, they put the slate in the bottom and they dumped all the slate in Boston. Boston, all the different harbors that are up by the Cape, they dumped the slate. And they came back with wood because there was no wood in the old world. It was all gone. They were using it for heating materials and building. This is a funerary table. Now, this is a brownstone. And if you come into the cemetery, what I have done is I've taken 6x6 pieces of wood and put them underneath these tables, painting them the same color as the posts because the tables are starting to collapse. So now that is a brownstone table, and it also has a white marble insert. Why are there tables? Everybody, that's the first question that people say to me when they come into the cemetery. Well, guys, I'm telling you, people would come into the cemetery on a Sunday, a Saturday, whatever day it might be. They would throw a cloth across that table and have dinner and spend the entire day there remembering the person that had passed. It is really interesting. So this is me doing a gravestone rubbing years back of Nathaniel Mirmam. Nathaniel Mirmam is a beautiful, beautiful slate stone. Actually, Nathaniel's next door. This is Caleb Mirmam, excuse me. And Caleb died of smallpox, and that's right on the monument. I do not advocate people coming in and arbitrarily doing gravestone rubbings. Come and see me. I have the correct paper, and I have the correct method to do it. If you look to where my left leg is, that is the original monument of Samuel Street. It is a fieldstone marker. So the torch that's there is part of a Halloween tour I did at night, and I'm showing people the brownstone of Samuel Street, he was the first minister of Wallingford. Again, speaking about Whittlesey, and that's a beautiful obelisk. It's a brownstone obelisk. They have a tendency of splitting at the top, and this one still is in great shape with Holy Trinity Church in the background. So when I first came into the cemetery, we looked at a bunch of things, and in 1975, we said, okay, well, the town is going to be, 1976 is going to be, our bicentennial. And so we decided to do something about the Lyman Hall Monument. And we have a flagpole there. We try to do our best to decorate it differently almost every year. And we have a tremendous amount of people coming in all the time to look at the monument and read it. The most important thing about this monument is that the town, way before Bob Beaumont and I were around, they decided to replicate the original monument of Lyman Hall, who died in Georgia. In the late 1800s, and to this day, we're still trying to find out this information, and we can't get anything. I've been on the phone with people in Atlanta and so forth, but the original monument that was on Lyman Hall's grave when he died, and it was buried in Savannah, Georgia, was shipped to Wallingford, Connecticut. They were going to break it up. They were going to break it in half and just the hell with it. And what they decided to bury Lyman Hall on the steps of the town hall in Atlanta, and they shipped the original monument to us. And I'm going to tell you something, we're very fortunate of that. Moses White Beach's monument. One of the most interesting things about life in Wallingford or life in New England is our seasons. And this is the north side, Lucreta Beach. The north side of the monument is pretty tattered because of the north wind and the weather. And if you look around the east and west and south sides, you can read it without a problem. See what I mean? Isn't that unbelievable with the wind and the weather and the acid rain and everything else we'll do to a monument? Okay, so Lyman Hall's monument has the Bennington flag over it, which I'm very proud to see that, and a beautiful tree that's next to it. I love talking about this stone. So what people don't realize is that when you run a cemetery and you're working in there every day and you're cutting grass and you're going by different gravestones, you see names and you remember names, and then you see people and things cross. John Kendrick, captain of the ship Defiance. Go into your history books and try to, or Google and try to find anything out about John Kendrick. Well, guess what? There's not a whole heck of a lot to find out about this guy. Except, I was in Cape Cod sitting on the beach, and I'm reading the Cape Cod Times. And there was an article in there, this is about 20 years ago. There's an article in there about John Kendrick. Harwich, Massachusetts. Met this girl from Virginia. Settled in Wallingford, Connecticut. His father retraced Ponce de Leon's trip, which is huge. Then he started the Wallingford Blue Coal Company. And his coal was hotter than anthracite from Pennsylvania. The guy was amazing. I mean, the history that we have in this town is mind-blowing. I said to you, when you look into a cemetery, you find a field stone, and a field stone says to you that, okay, well, hey, this cemetery is pretty old. So somebody hand chiseled this. This is Mary Yale's monument, 1703. Now, Mary Yale was a part of the founders of Yale University. So what did I do a few years ago? I contacted Yale and I tried to get some money out of them to kind of help the cemetery along, and they didn't return my calls. This is one of two. There is another monument like this somewhere else, and I know that they said there was one of two. Now, this is the mother-daughter monument. So if you look at the top of the monument and you see that facial feature, and you look down below to the left, you'll see another face exactly like the top. You see it? Look down in the corner. See the corner, the little circle there? I need to get myself one of those infrared things. Okay, again, that was Samuel Street. Okay. Now, this has a great story. This is a zinky. Does anybody know what a zinky is? All right, so this is completely hollow.
Sold by Sears and Roebuck, right?
You're absolutely correct. You are absolutely correct. Now, Sears and Roebuck produced these monuments for many, many years. They're completely made out of zinc. And if you go and look at this monument, you will see that you can unscrew the plates that are around the corner of it. Well, I tell this story because it's a good story. It was a long time ago, and nobody got hurt, and everything was good. And I was involved with my Boy Scout troop, and we were playing Capture the Flag in the cemetery. And we were trying to play hide and seek and everything else, so we took one of the plates off, and one of the kids hopped inside the monument and scared the hell out of everybody. But it was a good thing. No, it was a good thing. Nobody got hurt. Okay, Soldier's Circle. There's a lot of controversy about this, and our dear historians, whether it be in town or whatever, have other ideas. But many, many years ago, Leo Del Rosso, who I worked with, working for the town back in the late 60s, said that these guys all came back from a battle during the Civil War. They were kind of buried head to toe in a circle. Whether that's true or not, you just gotta think about legend and lore. These are GAR markers. Now, I started a program quite a few years back. If you go to certain cemeteries, you'll see these markers that look all kind of brown and tarnished. And what we did was, we had an Eagle project where we took the markers, made sure that we knew exactly where they were, and we cleaned all the markers with an acid, and then put a material on them that would keep them looking good from here on. And we still could, every single couple of years, we make sure that we coat them again. And what it's done is it's kept them really looking great. And there's nothing better than going into a cemetery and seeing a GAR marker that is standing tall and a beautiful flag on top of it. Shovel's there for a reason. 42 years I dug graves by hand. I dug over 1,000 graves by hand. Power washer, penny. Now, why am I showing you a penny? Because when you put a monument on a flat, like if you've got a base and you're putting the die, we call it a die, on top of the base, you put a penny in the corner, which keeps it elevated exactly that height, so we can go ahead and put the caulking around it, and it'll stay, and it'll always be straight. So, a number of years ago, I was at a conference with the New England Cemetery Association, and there was a guy who was offering veterans a special way of interment, meaning burial, cremation burial. So, being part of the Connecticut Guard, I was able to get these old tubes from our mortars. And what the guy did was he would put the cremated remains inside the mortar tube and then inter that in the ground. And that would be more or less their casket or their cremation container. I have this picture for a reason. Over the years, being a mailman and also running the cemetery, I've met so many nice people. And there was a fellow by the name of Maynard Robinson. He lived at 15 Hampton Trail over in Spring Lake. And I tried to find a way to blow out my water lines every year because the water lines would break. And to the left of that hose you could see on the right, he made me this thing so that I could blow out the water lines. And it's just something that I will never forget. So, like Mary Beth had made a comment before about our roads. Our roads are predominantly dirt, they're sand. So every year we do a process of reclaiming the roads, and we use the extraneous materials from graves and redo the roads and try to keep everything looking pretty nice. That looks really nice. We usually get this done. Of course, you can see the trees are starting to turn. So this is when we were able to purchase the backhoe. The backhoe came in 11 years ago, which, what most taxpayers and most people don't realize is that Joe Hortense gave the town $20,000 for us to purchase that backhoe. Now, this is a pretty cool picture because I have a tremendous amount of red-tailed hawks on the cemetery, and you see the top of that obelisk with the red-tailed hawk looking for his prey? Kind of interesting. That's a real bird.
So it's not part of the monument?
What's that?
It's not part of the monument?
No, it's not. That is a bird, and he's looking for rabbits. So this gives you an idea what a cremation burial is like and what we do. I set up a table. Like, I don't know if you've been to cremation burials, and I'm sure you have. But I have an old table that I got from the National Guard, and they were throwing it away. So I put it there. I have a tablecloth on there, and we put the remains on there, set up with tables and chairs, and we set things up like this. We try to do our best to give the family the best look that they possibly can have at the last time. Okay, so many years ago, we had a lot of vandalism at the cemetery. And so when we had the vandalism, it cost the cemetery a lot of money in the town. And I decided to go to a bunch of courses and so forth and started to learn how to do my best to bring the monuments back to life. And this is part of the process. This is the Gifford Stone. This is an African American that was buried many, many years ago. And that monument had fallen over, and we were putting it back together. We used the backhoe to lift it up so nobody got hurt. We did the foundation and put it right back in place. So there's a lot of comments people will make about setting a monument back into wet concrete or putting it into a trough. This situation, the bottom of the monument was so bad that there's no way in the world we were going to be able to save it. So we did our best to get it back up. Another picture of that. Vandalism has, I want to say this and jinx myself, but it has kind of ceased because of the cameras we have in the cemetery. We have 28 cameras right now. It's not an easy thing. I mean, it's no one's perfect when they put these monuments back together, okay? There's one guy that's better than the other guy, and there's another one that tries more than the other one. But we do our best to make it work. Again, the backhoe working to help us put 2 more back up. So, a couple years ago, we had an issue down the cemetery where I couldn't get water. And I had to call in the water division and say, guys, help me out. Well, there was an air pocket in a pipe, and I would have never been able to figure that out, but they found the air pocket in the pipe. Okay, this is the traditional burial. Traditional burial meaning casket burial. This is South Colony Street across from where Stella's Pizza used to be. We couldn't get the vault into the grave, so I got the Wallingford police involved and we closed down part of South Colony Street and lifted the monument. And this guy was amazing how he operated this vault truck to get the vault into the grave. So, quite a few years ago, Paul Pender, who had the old Irish bar over on Quinnipiac Street, decided to do a movie, and I was part of that movie. And I acquired a casket to help him do the funeral thing that was in his movie, and that's the casket. Again, showing you what a cremation burial setup is. And it's, again, you want to leave the family with their lasting look of somewhat happiness, even though they're fighting the worst time of their lives. Backhoe in work, pulling out a bush. So we acquired a plow and put it together and put that plow on the backhoe, and we use that plow now to plow the grounds. Now, this is an interesting thing that I learned at one of my association meetings. There was a fellow up in Maine that had a cemetery that was pretty much like mine, and ours, I should say. And it was all gravel and dirt. So what he did was he took a stainless steel pipe and affixed it to the cutting edge of the plow. And I looked at him and I said, what the hell did you do that for? And he said, because I can plow snow and it will not dig in. And how right was he? There's the plow getting ready to be affixed with that pipe. Plow is all set and ready to go. That's our equipment. That's me washing the equipment. We plow snow, we do everything. So, this is an interesting thing. Most of you know that I am not a smoker. I hate it. It is what it is. So, my business card is the third most collected business card in America. And if you read this came from the Springfield Union in 1982. And be sure to have a business card ready when you meet Walter Day of Fairfield, Iowa, will want it for his collection, which already numbers 3 million. He has one from Manuel Noriega. He has one from Kevin Costner. But then there's the one advertising the Center Street Cemetery in Wallingford. Keep smoking, I can't wait. It kind of gets it across. So, I found this many years ago, back in the 70s. The Center Street Cemetery's net worth for the property is $440,000. Pretty cool. I'm sure it's worth a lot more now. Beth Israel Cemetery at Dudley Avenue, $21,000. All right. This is a very interesting book. So if any of you have nothing to do with your time and you want to read a funny book, you got to read about a cemeterian like me. And this was given to me when I had my knee replaced back 15 years ago. And it's all about a cemeterian and what we do. This is a very interesting story. So I got this phone call from these fellows here. I will not tell you their names. I will not tell you where they're from. And they said, Bob, can we talk to you? Well, we have 2 gravestones that we've been stepping on for over 100 years, our family. And we want them to go back to where they belong. Well, here's what happened. These 2 monuments were from 2 Civil War veterans from Wallingford. And this is where people sometimes get all fired up over something that they should not get fired up about. Back in the day when a veteran was buried and a monument, military monument was given to them, the Civil War especially, years had gone by and the United States government decided to replace those monuments with a proper military monument. So what did they do with the old monuments? They discarded them, threw them away. So these monuments ended up at these people's houses, and they, again, used them for steps, whatever. It could have been a flea market, it could have been something. But what I did was I researched it and I found the monuments where they are, and I took those monuments and put them right next door to the monuments that the U.S. government replaced them with. So they all came home. Interesting picture. The last witch to be put on trial, who escaped to go to Staten Island with her mother. I constantly have people who feel that it's important to come over and sit by the Benham witch's family grave. Whether they feel that there's something coming out of the ground, whether they feel whatever it might be, but that's what happens. No hurt happens, no problems. It just, I usually call the Wallingford police and I say, time to get them out of here. This is a very funny picture. Now, I'm a Red Sox fan. And many years ago, Gene Catala and Louis, the guys that worked at Central Barbershop, they're Yankee fans, and a friend of mine decided to shinny up that tree and put that sign about 25 feet in the air so it looked exactly straight down the Central Barbershop. I kind of liked it, but it didn't last long. So this is what is going on. You know, time, I've been doing this stuff for a very, very long time, and I've seen so many things happen, people change. I stood in front of you tonight and I said to all of you, to think about it and make your plans. Come and talk to me. I'll sit with you anytime you want. And I'll help you down the trail, because that's what I do. So now this is what's going on around our country. This is a sign that was in a place that I love to go to, and they put it up and said, "Before I die, what do I want to do?" And it's so scary when you look at what people are putting there. One person said, I want to love myself. Another person says, I want to get married. I want to have kids. I want to adopt. People are reaching out. They're reaching out where they've never have. And in a way, it's sad to see this, but in a way, it's a learning tool. It will help every one of us to help each other. So there's young Bob Beaumont in the back when he was younger, and Bill Dickinson. And many years ago, I was cutting grass in the cemetery, and this van comes in the cemetery. And the van had New York license plates on it. And I see 8 African-American folks get out of the van. And I said, okay, what is this? So I am not afraid of anybody. I go right over to them and I says, introduce myself. And I said, hello. Well, they were here. They're part of the New York Militia Guard. And they were here to pay homage to William P. Smith. Now, William P. Smith, I knew nothing about this guy. Again, like I said, I learn something every day. So when you come down to the cemetery and you come down to where the Soldier Circle is and you look to the north, you will see an eagle project that we just finished about William P. Smith. And it's William P. Smith, 54th Colored Infantry Regiment of the Massachusetts Volunteers. Do you remember the movie Glory? Does everybody remember that movie, Glory, with Matthew Broderick and Morgan Freeman? Let me tell you something. This still throws shivers through my body because we decided to take this, we meaning the association, Cemetery Association, we decided to take this and run with it because it was so important. And then, as an EEO officer in the Guard, I taught this to guardsmen, and I also taught it to 2 high school classes, Lyman Hall and Shan, and we did a whole skit about it at the town hall. I don't know if Tom, do you still have that? You might have that, no?
I'd have to look in the archives.
Okay. So anyway, so what we did, what happened here was this. William P. Smith, African-American, here he is in 1863, and he cannot join the Union Army because Connecticut would not allow blacks to join the Union Army. So he decided to go to Massachusetts and join the 54th Colored Infantry Regiment, the Massachusetts Glory Regiment, the Volunteers. Gets wounded 3 times at Beaufort, South Carolina, in the hospital. He's in the hospital. He fought at Battery Wagner, which is a tremendous battle if you ever watched the movie Glory. So you would think that this guy's life, everything that he did would just end there. You know, he would go off and just be a pauper or whatever he might be. No, this guy never quit. And I love to teach this story about him because I tell kids this story about this all the time because he never gave up. He came home to Wallingford to a hero's welcome. A hero's welcome. Now think about this. Here's this black man coming back from the war to a hero's welcome. The town fathers give him 26 acres of land on Community Lake. He becomes a hunter and a trapper, but he did not give up there. He founded the first fife and drum corps in America called the Dreadnoughts. He was the first African-American to be in the Governor's Guard band and the Wallingford Brass Band that rode the train. But he didn't give up there. He founded the first Negro baseball team called the Jackson Blues. Now, this is all history. You can find this if you go looking for it. So here's my classmate, Richard Hatt, and he and I were in Lyman Hall and graduated together, and we're proudly standing there by William P. Smith's monument. William P. Smith, Company F, 54th. Colored. Everybody looks at that and thinks it's gold. Colored Infantry Regiment, Massachusetts Volunteers. January 4th, he died, 1916. And I'm going to tell you something. I have records. There was over 300 people in that cold January day at his burial. All right, this is when I was thin. Nobody's laughing. Thank you. So here I am digging a grave. That's a brownstone that I repaired. This one here, I'm working on the bottom of it. I love this monument, this tree. That tree is still looking absolutely beautiful. The fall is coming just before Celebrate Wallingford. If you can come into the cemetery and take a look, you'll see that tree. All right, doing leaves. This is the worst time of season for any of us to run cemeteries, especially if we have a lot of leaves. Public Works comes in once a year to take my leaves and brush out. I love this picture. And that's it. Thank you. The question was, the wrought iron gates still there? Yes, they are.
But that was replaced, was it not?
The wrought iron gates were sent out and refurbished.
How old are they?
Well, the Wallace and Whittlesey family, we're looking probably late 1800s, but the cemetery wall, when the wall was built, they were probably put up in the 1920s.
It's still on.
They're still there. Yeah. I mean, I'll take questions in a second. But when the gates were put back, they should have been snugged up to the wall, but they could not get them against the wall. And the reason why, you won't believe this, is because when they ran the electrical lines underground, they ran them right through where that area is, and they couldn't dig into the electrical lines. Yes?
When was the last time they were locked, or were they ever locked?
Okay, great question. Last time they were locked, probably during a hurricane. And I don't lock the gates.
No, I didn't think.
The police can't go in there if I lock them.
But I mean,
And I have,
Were they designed to be locked?
they're designed to be locked.
Were they ever locked?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but you gotta remember something. If you lock the gates, you gotta be there 24/7.
That's the problem.
And I have people visiting the graveyard all night long. I can tell you that. Yes. Anybody? Yes.
How many grave sites are still available?
I knew that was gonna happen. Okay, so let's use a little common sense here. This is a question that comes to me all the time. All right. And I will bring every one of you down to the cemetery and show you and prove to you what I'm talking about. When Myrtle and her husband Norman came here from Ireland, and they had 10 kids, they went down to Center Street Cemetery, they walked out a plot that they wanted, they put a monument in the middle of it. All those 10 kids, 2 stayed in Wallingford, 8 left to go to California, meaning you had all this extra space. If you look at all old New England cemeteries, this is something that every old cemetery is dealing with. Okay, were there deeds for these grave spots? No, there were not. So, are we reclaiming some of that area? Yes, but not to encumber any of the family's lot. Now, traditional burial is 25 to 30% of the business right now. Cremation burial, 65 to 70. So with cremation burial at the Center Street Cemetery or any other cemetery, you have more of an advantage for burial and to keep your cemetery going.
Is that because it's a smaller space?
Cremation burial right now is so the right way to go. I don't want to jinx anybody or because someone might say traditional burial. That's your decision. Okay, my mom and dad decided for cremation burial. Okay, that's not what the church wanted years ago, but the church has changed. Everybody's has to change. So one thing that we do, which is very, very important, back in the day when there was cremation burial, when the cremains came to us, remember, they're not ashes. They're cremated remains. When they came to us, they were in a tin can, almost like a coffee can. That dissipated in the ground so fast that they decided to come back and say, okay, now we're going to go to plastic. So what we do at Center Street Cemetery, and a lot of other cemeteries do, is make sure that people's cremated remains are protected in a urn vault, which is what we use is a piece of plastic that is so tough that you can drive over it, you will not break it, and it'll last forever. Anybody else? Yes.
Just
Diane.
two things. When you said about pre-planning, it is definitely a thing to do. Sahara at Matt Bailey's Bailey Funeral Home is excellent. The thing with people don't know is you don't have to stay with that funeral home. As long as you're pre-planned and you decide you're going to move to California and you want to be buried in California, whatever, they will forward that information to wherever you're going to be buried. So you do not have to stay with Bailey's or Wallingford or wherever. And the other thing is that nowadays, if you research cremains, there's not just, let's go in the ground. Yeah, people like to go in the ground, but there are so many options now for your cremains that it's just interesting. I've changed the way I want to be. I'm going to be cremated, and I'm going to be made into river stones. And it's, again, Sierra is the one that showed me to do that. And it's just very interesting. I'll be made into stones, and people can take a stone of me and can write on it, whatever.
So I think that's amazing because, first of all, let me just reiterate this again. Matt Bailey and Dave McDonald run two incredible funeral homes. We're very fortunate. Sahara and I are the ones that did that program the other night with tremendous results of people that had no clue of what we could do for them. And again, like what Diane just said, now Diane and I are classmates, so we go back a long time. And you have a choice now. And being up in years, we all have a choice to do. I'm amazed over here listening that a 6-year-old has made her plans for her decisions in her passing, her death, which I think is tremendous. And, go on and make the decision. Don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. Because number one, you got to get what you want. Don't let anybody else decide what you want. And number three, think about the finances that goes along with this. Because as nothing's getting any cheaper, it's all going this way. Who else? Yeah, Billy.
I've been attending some of these Wallingford Historic Preservation Trust presentations, and the gentleman there, Chris Manapice, stated at several of them, there's at least 300 enslaved African Americans that are interred at the Center Street Cemetery, and he goes on to say that they have no idea where they are located. So how do we know where, number one, how do we know where they're located? How do we find out, number one? And I'll change that first, thank you.
Well, Bill, okay, you just said you think that there's 300 enslaved people buried in the Center Street Cemetery. I have no record of that, okay? Mr. Makepeace, I met him. He has no proof. I wish I knew, to be honest with you, Bill. I mean, anybody who runs a cemetery, and I will vouch for all my fellow cemeterians, if they thought that there was 300 enslaved African Americans in a certain place in their cemetery, I'm sure they would garden that spot off. And to be quite frank with you, I've done a lot of interments, and how do you find 300 enslaved people? I think it's a comment that was made, and there's no answer, Bill. I mean, give me proof if you think there are, then show it to me.
Well, some of the articles in the Wallingford magazine, there was a woman named Bonnie Borney, I don't want to pronounce her name.
I know Barney Borney very well.
Right, okay. she had stated there was another gentleman named Washington, Alfonso Washington, that's interred down there. And they know that he's interred down there, but they don't know where he is. The same thing with the 300 enslaved people. Man of Peace, and I don't want to speak for Man of Peace, he's the vice president of Wallingford Historic Preservation Trust. They provided all the documents. They went through the town hall, all the records, all the stuff, so they know they're down there. They just don't know where. And then in one of the articles, that same woman had talked about, this is her quote, it sounds bad, but it says section of the Center Street Cemetery. So I've been trying to find out where the colored section, or as she is quoted as saying section, is, because in the Wallingford magazine, it says it was a quarter of the cemetery. So I would imagine that at some point, and I don't know, I'm trying to find this out. I've been on this quest for a decade. Where that section is, because, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to interject. I've been through a lot of the town records, and they don't document who is asleep. Like you're talking 300. There might be one or two mentioned there that were black or freed slave, but when they buried people, the town clerk, whoever was in charge, wrote out the data. There isn't anything there that says this is a black slave. So I don't see where they would come up with this.
There's actually records. I've been to the town vault for years. It's there. Man of Peace has it. The church up on the top of the hill has records from the church. A lot of the churches have them. They did the research. This is what they do. I just went there, attended it, and there was a lot of people just like this, and he went on to, matter of fact, I encourage all you guys to watch it, because they put it right up on the screen. What I'm just saying is that and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, but don't those same 300 people that we have no idea where they are deserve that respect? Don't we deserve to at least try our best as a community? It's one of the oldest cemeteries in the state, and just say, hey, we should be doing the right thing here, and let's try to find out what this location. The state has offered to do ground penetrating radar.
Bill, can I answer you if you don't mind?
Sure.
Okay, you made a point, all right? I've been down there for a long time. You weren't probably when you were in high school when I started working there. It doesn't matter. If there is a place where there are 300 people buried, do you think for 2 seconds that I would dig a grave where there's a monument or there's something where there's 300 people there? It's not going to happen, Bill. Okay? But now, let me finish. Whoever came up with the 300 number, I have no idea. Mr. Makepeace, I've met him, like I said to you. But I go by the facts like you do, and I go by the record like you do. If I had Bill Comerford, African American, buried in a certain place in the Center Street Cemetery, do you think I'm going to disinter or move that grave? I'm not going to do that. So believe me when I tell you, if there is 300 people, and I questioned Bonnie Bourne. Bonnie Bourne's a great gal, but I questioned her about the comment she made, because even a past superintendent that was before me, when he heard that, was a little surprised. So get this one thing through your head. I am not going to go ahead and dig graves in an area where there's so-called 300 people buried. We don't do that. We have a way of finding if there was a grave there, and that's what I do.
And I'm not here for a debate.
No, it's okay, but you brought the point up, Bill.
No, and I totally agree with that. But my point is that me as a concerned person and trying to get some information about it, I have a lot of faith, because the guy's got a master's degree. They brought it all there. They said, here's where that is. They actually listed everything, including they have pictures of the documents from the town clerk's office.
Well, I would honestly, Billy, listen, I would honestly like to see that. In an effort to not keep these people here late tonight, if you would like to discuss it with me, talk to me after this program. How's that? Face to face. I have no problem with that, Bill. Okay? Anybody else? Yes?
Did you have any other Sears monuments in there other than that one?
There's 5.
5?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, there is. There's 5. Yeah.
It's impressive.
Yeah, and really, you know what? Most of you, those Sears monuments were a way for people to be able to afford memorialization. And Sears was so interesting about it that they had these little, to take the sign sides off, and they would make the name. And it's all zinc.
I understood.
It'll last for a lifetime.
There was some kind of compartment in the back where they could store, some small gardening tools or.
And that is very true. And one more last interesting story about that. Many, many years ago, the Wallingford Police Department were having a problem downtown in Wallingford. This was in the early 70s. And there was a certain individual who was making drops in the cemetery. And he was making drops inside that monument. And there was a fellow by the name of Mert Howard. He's long gone now, but he was a great detective. And he staked out the cemetery, and he caught him doing it. Anybody else? Anybody else? No? Thank you.